Well, good morning, folks. My name is Austin Davis. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Lake Champlain Chamber, and thank you for coming out for our March legislative breakfast. I'm glad the weather didn't interfere with this one. But as a reminder to folks, our legislative breakfast at the 9 has been rescheduled to April 20th. And if you were registered before, or still registered, if you want to get registered, we'll open that up next week. Thank you all for coming out. I'm really appreciative to be here at dealer.com this morning, an employer with an amazing presence in this community, and really appreciative of the support and sponsorship of East Rise Credit Union to make these legislative breakfasts and our work possible. I'm really excited for this panel this morning. I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing a number of folks who have just so much expertise in this area already, who are doing the hard work, and I'm really excited to have this panel kind of outline how we can bundle that work together, streamline things, and build towards a more efficient future with better customer service for everyone in our region. But first, I want to introduce our host, Nguyen Openshaw Dion, sorry.
We just had that conversation.
My family are Dion's. She's a Dion. Who oversees the work associated with dealer.com's websites, advertising, and management services, and automotive marketing platform. Through that work, she aims to build enduring value for the dealership by driving the digital storefronts and their customer relations forward. Nguyen joined the company in 2009, and she's worked in a variety of roles, learning everything there is to know about our products and services along the way. At Cox Automotive Veteran, she's always spent time at DealerTrack, where she's worked on various mission-critical initiatives with a track record of successful management, managing people, projects, and products. She brings diversity of experience, and that enriches every project she touches. She holds multiple degrees, including a master's in business administration from the College of William and Mary. Well, thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
All right, I usually stand up front right here when we have a meeting, so I don't mean to crowd you all. So welcome and thank you for coming to this Chamber of Commerce event. I think dealer.com and Cox Automotive are really excited to host. And I was just going to indulge for a couple minutes and tell you a little bit about the history here. As Austin said, I started here in 2009, and we have some veterans in the audience as well that have been here for just as long. So many of us have been on what you all probably heard as the rocket ship of dealer.com and its history. So dealer.com was founded in 1998 by a local car dealer who here remembers Earthy Cars. Yes, okay. So Earthy Cars and about 4 new graduates coming out of Clarkson who decided that there was a better way to sell cars on this thing called the internet. And so that was back in 1998. There's many hard years where there was scraping by to make payroll for the employees, but that started changing in about 2007, 2008, which was actually a recession and a terrible time to join the automotive industry, but that's when I joined in 2009. And the rocket ship started growing because we caught the eye of a lot of automotive manufacturers. So we had a really big manufacturer, Chrysler, come to us and say, we want you all to launch 3,000 websites, and your competitor says it's going to take them 18 months. And when we said, we will do it in 3. So that kind of started the rocket ship for dealer.com, and we caught the eye of Chrysler, but Audi and Subaru, and so pretty much every automotive manufacturer was using dealer.com to launch their dealership websites. And so in 2013, we caught the eye of DealerTrack, which Austin mentioned. They acquired dealer.com for $1 billion. And then a year and a half later, at the end of 2015, we were acquired by Cox Automotive. So if you talk to someone from this location, they will tell you that they either work for dealer.com or they work for Cox Automotive. This location actually has about 700 employees across Vermont, 100 that live right here in Burlington. And I would say half of them work on dealer.com. The other half work on many of the different brands that Cox Automotive has, like Auto Trader and Kelley Blue Book. And our headquarters are actually in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are the second biggest location here in Burlington, Vermont. And Cox Automotive employs about 30,000 employees kind of worldwide. So there's a lot that happens here in this little location. We're really proud of how much we contribute not only to Vermont, but also to Cox Automotive. And this location has a legacy of contributing to the community. We have spent, I think we've given over $2 million in grants. Our team members are always out and about helping local communities and volunteering, and that doesn't stop even with all the acquisitions that we've been through. So I just wanted to give a brief little history of doula.com. If anyone's interested afterwards, I think Jesse over there could raise his hand. If anyone wants a tour of those facilities, we are happy to take you on that tour. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to the Commerce.
Thank you so much for hosting us this morning in this great venue. So I'll leave it to the panelists to introduce themselves, but I just wanted to give a little additional context for this. Show of hands for folks in the audience who work with the Regional Affairs Committee. There's a few of you here today. So we're really grateful to these folks, and we've engaged in numerous just great conversations over the year with leaders on issues of housing and public safety and quality of life and tourism for our region. And I think I can speak for all of them. We have a bit of a running joke in the committee that eventually we just hit a point where we just say, wow, this would be much easier if we had some form of regional government. And so it's been a joke that's been running for so long that we decided we need to really do something about this. And so the Lake Chamber is looking to start a conversation today and open it up to everybody going forward to start talking about how do we consolidate and streamline and build structures that can tie a lot of the fantastic work that folks do around our region together in a non-duplicative way, to not create any kind of form of bureaucracy, but to build a path forward that can take some of the day-to-day, some of the nitty-gritty off the backs of municipalities and other entities, and consolidate, find economies of scale, and then open up the ability for municipalities to really do the work that we all want them to do. The placemaking, the civic engagement, just the broader things that make each community have an identity that makes you want to live and work there. But most of us engage with many municipalities on a day-to-day basis. You might start your day in your home municipality, drop a kid off at school in another municipality, drive through one or two more on your way to work, and a fifth or sixth municipality, and then grocery shop at the seventh on the way home. You know, we all cross these lines day to day, and so we want to start having conversations about how can we make those lines a little bit less noticeable, and how can we make the customer service experience of you as a citizen more effective. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan, and he's going to kick off the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see a bunch of familiar faces out there. Looking forward to the dialogue. I'm Dan Smith. I'm President and CEO of the Vermont Community Foundation. And I just want to be really clear that anything provocative or challenging that I say today can be attributed to the Dan Smith who runs the Y. And anything thoughtful or brilliant, I want credit for. I'd just like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves, just your name, the role you hold, and where you live. And actually the fourth is how many town lines you crossed to get here today.
Sorry, can you say those again?
Your name, the role you hold, where you live, and how many town lines you crossed to get here today. But the last is, nobody's going to audit that.
My name is Samantha Sheehan. I'm the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. It's good, okay. And immediately before working for the League, I actually worked here for the city of Burlington under former Mayor Murrow Weinberger, where I commuted every day from my home in Hancock. And I truly cannot count the number of municipalities I crossed through, but it's definitely 3 counties.
Hi, good morning. Charlie Baker, I'm the Executive Director of the Champlain County Regional Planning Commission. Yeah, good to see a lot of friends and folks I know, and some I don't, so glad to see you also. I actually live in Burlington now. I used to live in South Burlington, and so I didn't cross any town lines to get here. Sorry, I'll do better next time. And yeah, lots to talk about.
Hi, good morning. I'm Edie Granning. I serve in the legislature. I live in Jericho. I'm the Vice Chair of Commerce and Economic Development. In the fall, I served with Martine as the co-chair of the School District Redistricting Task Force, so we did a lot of traveling across the state for that. Oh, and I serve on the Mount Mansfield School District School Board, which is a 5-town board, and I was part of that merger from 9 school districts to 1 school district a few years ago with that. I only crossed, I think, 4 towns to get here, considering how far I went. I thought that's not that many towns.
Good morning, everybody. Excuse my voice. I feel much better than I sound. My name is Martine LaRocque-Ulick. I am a senator. I live in the new north end of Burlington, so I just went from north to south. I didn't cross any town lines. I'm vice chair of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee, and I serve on the Finance Committee. I just wrapped up 8 years on the Burlington School Board, and as Edie said, I spent most of the summer with her working on how to reimagine our education landscape in the state of Vermont. And I'm sure we will get an opportunity to dig into that. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you all. Okay, I'm going to dive right into, we're going to do a few context setting questions, get some perspectives, and then really we want to open it up for questions and observations from the audience. I will say some of the, this is a politically fraught discussion, so some of the discussion may, from my perspective, I like to jar open a dialogue sometimes, so if I err on the side of the provocative, the intent is to create space for conversation. I also have the privilege of sitting in the cheap seats of an organization that sits outside of city government, and we can help facilitate this dialogue. That's the intent of the facilitation today. You know, the state of Vermont, as we look ahead in the coming 5-10 years, we're navigating along with the rest of the country and the globe any number of major transitions, major transformations in the way the climate shows up on our doorsteps, major transformations in political dialogue and partisanship, major transformations in the economy in terms of workforce as we look at the implications of artificial intelligence and the implications of the natural resource economies that Vermont has traditionally relied on. And yet, when we look at our civic structure, we do seem to be relying on 19th century structures to solve 21st century challenges. And sometimes we wonder why progress seems halting and challenging. And so, what I'd love panelists to observe is where in their work they see historically and looking ahead some of the patterns of regionalization that are actually solving for bigger problems. Vermont has a habit of regionalizing things on an ad hoc basis. So where has that worked? What are those patterns? What does that look like? How is regionalization showing up in your work and the things you see? Sure, I'll start with Samantha since she's right here.
Sorry. Is it working yet? As I work with municipal officials, regionalization doesn't show up every day, but it is showing up in conversations that we have with town managers and mayors and select board members, planning commission members, and so on, as they think about how to deliver a really high quality of public government services in the future without adding cost on taxpayers or more burden on town halls. We have asked our members about this in annual membership surveys, and it's interesting that the reason they think regionalization is a good idea is to improve services, and their top concern is about making more layers of bureaucracy and cost without being able to improve that service. There's also a restriction in what municipalities can do in cooperating together. I think we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but sometimes these conversations start at the ground level and towns are interested in coming together to share a salt shed or consolidate fire departments or inter-municipal contract for snow plowing and sidewalk maintenance. And then they find that the available options for them to do that in this cost-effective way that improves service is really limited. So those are the types of conversations that we have with local officials. And then of course, they have a concern about that local decision-making being sort of ripped away by actions of state government to sort of force regionalization, which there is some legislation moving forward, particularly that conversation in the legislature sort of particularly advanced when it comes to regional assessment or property valuation. And it's interesting because, VLCT doesn't have an official policy on the regionalization of assessment, and that's because it will affect each municipality in a very different way. There are some for who regionalization will save cost and relieve primarily volunteer local officials from an incredible amount of work and obligation under state law. And then there's municipalities like the one we're in here in Burlington, which has had a long professionalized, fully staffed Office of Assessors that maintains a really high quality grand list. So, we also keep an eye out on these sort of proposals, and it's my job to advocate that when we talk about regionalizing public services, that there not be sort of winners and losers, and that we are reaching out to meet the capacity of every community, even the smallest ones.
I work for the Regional Planning Commission, which if you're not familiar, that is a regional form of government that is made up of all the municipalities in Chittenden County. There's 11 of us around the state. And there have been various forms of regional government, the solid waste districts. In Chittenden County, we have GMT, we have a park district, we have a water district. Most of those were created in the 70s. So there was a lot of government reform, late 60s, 70s. And we're actually, my organization is celebrating our 60th birthday this year. And so this is not a new issue, I guess is part of my point there. But since the day I got here, almost 18 years ago, just a few weeks ago, but this topic has been coming up. I think I had town managers and police chiefs in my conference room at that time. Can we regionalize the police departments in Chittenden County? And clearly that has not happened. So, the answer to that, that turned into, can we regionalize dispatch? We actually formed a public safety authority to do that. And it's, there's still some hope there that we'll get there. Then broadband. We actually formed a communications union district to do broadband work, which happened in a lot of the rest, or in all the rest of the state too. So, but every time we do these things, we have to create a new government. And so that's, I think, and I worked for a couple county governments in the mid-Atlantic part of the country before moving here. There are other ways to do these services without having to create a new municipality of municipalities every time. So anyway, I hope we have some more conversation about that.
I just have a quick answer. I think about our park districts, which are regional, but they don't do a lot. They're very very small purpose. And I think about the fact that we have been able to do that, mostly on a volunteer basis, but come together for small purposes across the state. And I talk to Charlie all the time about, can't the RPCs do this for us? Because we bump into the fact that, on committee work, we can't get information. We don't know what's going on, or it's so vastly different across different parts of the state, how things are going. And so for us to do better work for everyone, the systems that we have, again, just aren't working. I don't have a lot of solutions, so I'm going to cede my time.
Thank you. Another example of a municipality is a school district. School districts are governed by elected officials. They can levy taxes, they own property, and they are complex systems and are greater complex systems. So this summer when we took on the idea, the notion of redistricting, it became clear pretty quickly that that is not an easy task, and Edie said she'll dig into that a little bit more. You know, redistricting is extremely complex. It takes time. It actually costs money. And as we dug into the evidence that we had this summer in the redistricting committee, it doesn't ultimately save money, or the savings are quite scant for the amount of investment that it costs to redistrict. So one of the strategies that we put forward was this notion of cooperative education service areas, which would, Edie and I like to say, there are 4 really strong points to a cooperative education service. One is that it saves money. It is not highly disruptive. It can lead to greater consolidation. And it's also something that we believe the Agency of Education has the capacity to do. Because we already have a few in the state. They're working really well. They're saving money. They're improving outcomes. And it's a model that we could use, across the state for quicker and relatively easier savings. Because I know we all are interested in bringing down property taxes.
It's interesting. And that's Matt and I are just going to share. It's an interesting thing to think of, to begin to recognize that we've created structures, and we live under structures for accountability in the form of municipal governments, but the capacity to deliver on the services, that people rely on is frequently delegated either to cross-municipal functions, works districts, water districts, fire districts, wastewater districts. And that accountability, it lies elsewhere from where the capacity to deliver exists. I'd like you guys just to comment a bit on the tensions that exist, and I want to open it up for questions from the audience after we get through a couple more rounds with the panel. But this sense that community identity is so central to who we are as a state. What are the prospects for leadership on this delivery of services on a level that actually ensures that capacity is equitable? What is the potential to move in a direction like that without mortgaging the sense of place and identity that is so central to who we are as a state?
Can I answer this first?
I would love that.
Great. So I'm just going to take the merger of Mount Mansfield School District, because I think this is a pretty good case study. 5 towns, Underhill, Jericho, Richmond, Bolton, and Huntington. And everyone sitting here who doesn't live in those towns will say, oh, they're pretty similar. They're pretty rural, Chittenden County. Jericho and Underhill work together on everything just about, right? Fire department shared, all kinds of services shared. It took us 6 years of significant work across towns. It took marketing. Going into towns and talking to people and convincing them that these neighbors just across this border want exactly the same things that you want and can work together, and your kids won't be worse off, they'll actually be better off by working together. And then we had a lawsuit. So it seems from the outside, and every single one of us, right? We're talking about this for municipalities, we're talking about this for schools, we're talking about this for hospitals. I'm sure we're talking about this for a bunch of other things, emergency services, right? We're talking about this in so many different ways. And the trust has to be there first. And so how do we build that trust to get rid of that tension of you're gonna get something and I'm gonna lose, right? Or I need more and you're gonna give it to me. Both of those things are that's that core tension, and it takes time and it takes significant effort toward building that trust. And we have to do that. We can't say Chittenden County is the winner and we have to get more from Chittenden County, right? That's a statewide talking point that happens. We hear it all the time in the legislature. What we have to say is, who's doing this best? How do we learn from them? How do we take that knowledge and make sure it's spread across the state? And that's, I think, lacking right now.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm happy to add just that when we heard from, over 5,000 folks this summer when we did our education work, the sense of community identity was so incredibly powerful and strong, and it came through in everything, in all of the testimony that we heard. And I can say, I grew up in South Burlington, and you may have seen what happened when we changed our high school mascot. It's still a sore spot in South Burlington, and that was years ago. I mean, that's just a mascot. So that sense of identity, that sense of attachment to community and history is incredibly powerful. And I would just echo what Representative Granning said in terms of trust and in terms of relationship building, extremely important.
Let's talk a bit about capacity in municipalities, right? Samantha, when we were doing a prep call for this, you talked a little bit about being in a small town and a smaller town than most of the towns in Chittenden County, and the pressure that lands on volunteers to deliver municipal capacity, and how that might play out broadly in the state.
Yeah, so Vermont has more than 250 municipalities. Lately seems like we sort of add one every year in the creation of new villages. And that's not including the other types of municipal corporations, which are school districts, communication districts, solid waste districts, fire districts. Those are all what did you say? RPCs, yeah. Those are all technically a municipal corporation, and they carry the same authorities as a town government. Anyway, what was I saying? They're rural. So more than 70% of Vermont municipalities have less than 2,500 people. It takes about 50 volunteers to fill all of the statutorily obligated town offices. So everything from constable to clerk, treasurer, auditor, justice of the peace, member of the Board of Civil Authority or Board of Listers. And that is a significant amount of work that we put on people, on Vermont citizens, to fill those incredibly vital roles that involve setting the grand list, collecting taxes, administering elections, and then also just providing the face of government at the local level. And then we have the reality that over the last 5 years, the state property tax rate has increased more than 40%. So we hear from all of our members that they are really constraining their municipal side tax rate and holding down the cost of property tax bills to the most extreme extent possible. And that really limits the sort of hard capacity of a local government as well. But I think it's really important here to acknowledge, so we're a Dillon's Law state. The authority of municipal government is derived from state law. And there are things that municipalities must do, such as administer elections and certify the grand list. And then there are things they can do, sort of on the authorization and with the will of their voters and their local legislative bodies. And that's things like have a police department, Like there are around 40-ish professional municipal police departments in the state. There are around 80 municipal sewer and water utilities, a couple dozen electric utilities. These are things that here in Chittenden County we may think of as a function of local government, but it's a real question. Is public safety a function of local government or not? When the majority of municipalities rely on the services of the sheriffs or the state police in order to deliver public safety. So the capacity question is a real and a difficult one to clear when we talk about regionalizing services, especially when that inevitably requires pairing one or two municipalities that have 5,000 or 10,000 or more people with a dozen much smaller, mostly volunteer-driven municipalities that surround them. And I gotta say, maybe the most important authority that is often mismatched with so the state obligates the town government to do something. We need the state to match the authority that is required to deliver and meet that obligation. And that gap usually is a revenue gap. So here in Burlington, there are, I think, 13 authorized sort of sub-tax rates that the city can apply. That is a totally unique authority that is created in charter. For most municipalities, the only revenue authority that they have is the municipal property tax rate, and then the option for a 1% local option tax on 3 different consumption taxes. So the ability to sort of commit funding to regionalized transit services or intermunicipal fire districts and fire departments is really constrained by their ability to commit long-term local resources to fund that regional investment.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, I think this, how to keep what is special about Vermont, which is, a lot of that is wrapped up in the individual town identity of how many folks in this room have served on a town committee at one time or another?
I meant to ask that.
Yeah, most of you. Not surprising compared, I didn't know the 50 stat, it takes 50, now Mike, I'm running out of battery. All right, I don't know, that's some sort of signal. One of the things I've been wondering about, and just kind of looking back at the history, and I guess because the RPCs were formed in the 60s, it kind of made me wonder, like, what was going on? There was clearly an issue at that time, like, let's create some entity to help it make it easier for towns to share some work, which is what we do day to day. But I really wonder, and at that time, towns had poor farms, but towns had some social services responsibilities that, the state went through a process and restructured that, what the services are that towns did and the state does. And we have now, the health department and agency, human services. It feels like maybe we're at that time again, where we need to kind of step back and look at what services should stay with the town, which are not, really tied to local identity, that could be done more efficiently or effectively regionally. And maybe there's some opportunity to do that. There was a study committee, sorry, I know that's kind of what that label. You can do whatever you need to do in your head when I say study. But they do have a real purpose in giving some opportunity for some thought in between the legislative session to work on some things. And there is a study committee on county and regional governance that is trying to, I think they're H762, I think there's a bill working its way through the legislature right now. But the intent of that, as I understand it, is to have some recommendations and maybe some draft legislation by the end of the calendar year. And I don't know if the state in general is ready to have another conversation about regionalization after the school district. I don't even know if I can say after the school district. During the school district conversation.
And healthcare conversation.
And so maybe we need to tee this up. This is a real question about our capacity just as communities to have multiple conversations going on that are big at the same time. Maybe this needs to wait a little bit. But at some point, we do need to have this conversation. Which services need to stay local, which are really tied to your local identity and your community's identity, and which are kind of agnostic about a place that could be done regionally.
Charlie, that's an interesting observation. Just the history of regionalization on an ad hoc basis essentially being a workaround for municipal and civic capacity gaps. I want to look to the two legislators at the end and ask a question about how it affects the legislative process in terms of access to insight and information about what's going on and your ability to make decisions about the experience of Vermonters when so much information is spread across so many different smaller places.
I was going to shift to healthcare, but we can do that later. I can just say that I think what I'm hearing you say is data is the word that's coming to my mind. And yeah, data we discovered was just a really difficult problem for us to overcome. There's a lot of data coming from school districts across the state that, again, sometimes the schools and the districts are so small that they can't even provide data because it would sort of out certain student populations. I mean, that is, so there's some data that's just sequestered and we're not allowed to look at it. But I would say generally you've probably read the stories in the news, but it's a real struggle to not only get data, but then to use it appropriately. It's a real challenge for our agencies, our state government across the board. So yes, it is hard to get information.
I'll just add, we spent $3 million on the MTAP program, which was designed to help the smallest towns in Vermont use their ARPA money. Because they didn't have the capacity to do it, and still a lot of them didn't have the capacity to do it with that extra money. And so it's not only data, there's so many struggles for us to make sure that every person in Vermont is getting the services that they need under the structure that we have today.
The ARPA analogy, and anybody on the panel who wants to correct me if I get this wrong, but part of that was also that the legislation in Congress was originally drafted to run the counties, and our delegation fixed it quickly so it could run the municipalities. But spreading that amount of money across 255 places as opposed to 14 has implications for the leverage that it may have generated.
Just follow up with the disaster recovery version of that, which is when FEMA comes to town and they kind of ask, okay, let's meet with your county and we'll figure out how to get projects moving forward. Like, no, you got to meet with every town. And they're like, what? Why? They're like, because the county's not there. There is no county. Right. For those of you who don't know, we have very limited county government in Vermont. We have a sheriff and side judges, and that's it. But side judges set a tax rate that gets baked into your municipal tax rate. You don't even see it, for better or worse. I don't know.
Or vote on it.
Well, yeah, or even get to vote on it because you vote for those side judges. They're the ones who approve it. So. Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic that the federal government struggles to deal with Vermont when we don't have county government. And so I don't think county government is necessarily the solution here, but there's some version of that maybe we could get to.
I want to sort of challenge this line of discussion a little bit, which is to say that Vermont on the whole has been incredibly effective at capturing federal investment and deploying it at the local level. And again, that is largely through the sort of grit and determination of volunteer road commissioners and select board chairs and treasurers who are working with VLCT and RPCs and other technical service providers to meet the really high standard for federal compliance. ARPA and FEMA are two really great examples of that. But in the last 5 years, hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into Vermont communities for flood recovery and resiliency, and for all sorts of ambitious endeavors. We're right here on the Champlain Parkway. What a sort of shining example of direct local to federal partnership. Helping municipalities deploy those resources quickly, efficiently, and sort of to their maximum impact is definitely an equity and capacity question.
Our organization put an incredible amount of effort into the philanthropic side of the flood response in 2023, 2024, and the engagement we were doing across communities that were flood affected. You saw town staff with a list of flood affected families on a yellow pad working into the evening, case managing. Relative to some places that were able to stand up independent nonprofits quickly that were able to navigate that case management with FEMA within a structure. So that capacity gap it does play out in terms of the experience of Vermont families in the context of a crisis. But I also want to inquire, and this is the last question before we open it up, what becomes possible in terms of the delivery of services if we try to standardize that middle layer of delegation? Right now we do it functionally, and the borders never match. The fire districts don't match the water districts, don't match the RPC, don't match the Act 250 District Commission. When I was at Vermont Technical College, the fire district at Randolph Center had actually been granted zoning authority in 1938, which meant anytime we wanted to do something on the campus, we had to go to the fire district board, which was about 7 neighbors in Randolph Center. You could usually find them at the Potbelly Stove and Floyd's store in the morning, so you could have an off-the-record conversation to get it done. But that's not a 21st century solution.
That sounds like an open meeting law violation. Maybe we don't endorse that.
I can either confirm or deny.
My answer will be quick. I mean, I believe that the opportunities are endless. I believe in the power and might of local government to get hard things done. And I think if we make it easier for them to work together and collaborate in efficient ways that maintain local control and transparency, it can only sort of get better. But it's worth saying that one of the things that might happen is we might lose something. We might lose that really close connection and spirit of direct democracy and the ability of the public to provide oversight and to inform the direction of their local government and the great investments that are made in their community, which right now, no select board member or town manager or mayor can escape their constituency, right? They live and serve and go to work in a relatively small district. And there's, I think we've all benefited from sort of the outcome of that type of relationship that we're able to have with government in Vermont.
What I keep thinking about this is how do we support our towns? Because they are overwhelmed right now. And I don't know if you've heard this, but we're getting older. And it's a real issue. Think about volunteer fire departments. Like, how is that going to be sustained? And I don't know, does that mean we're going to have to professionalize at a regional level? That's not going to be cheaper, but it'll maybe be there as opposed to maybe the volunteers aren't there anymore. So we really do need to think about how to evolve. Things are always going to change. They're either going to change in a negative way or in a positive way, and that may be somewhat based on your perspective. But I think we do need to figure out how to empower local officials and trust them. Right now, to be honest, the select boards don't see, when my board passes a dues increase, the select board doesn't really get to vote on that. They're just kind of handed a bill. And the same thing happens with the solid waste district and these other regional entities. So I think, is there a way to actually make that even more accessible to elected officials so that there is more accountability there to elected officials, because that's maybe something that we are losing as we regionalize now, is the connection to the public and elected officials.
Yeah, I love the idea of taking all of the work that is done right now and figuring out mapping, right? Where should it be done? Should it be done at the town? Should it be done at the county? Should it be done at the state level? We had a tour of the archivist building. They can take land records and make sure that they're accessible for us today if we wanted them to. We wouldn't have to record them at every town. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but having that clear, one place that is safe, right, internet-based, available, they have the capacity to do it. I just think about, there's so many things that we're not even thinking about right now that we could do differently and make it better for everyone. It might be the same for some people, but it would be better for more people. So if it can be the same or better and cheaper, we should be considering that.
Because we didn't get to talk about healthcare, I'll just say that it is obviously a huge cost driver in the state of Vermont. I think everyone knows that. Act 67, which is hospital transformation, is requiring us to think regionally in terms of our healthcare delivery system. And when we think about service areas of excellence, we're talking about regionalizing. I think Samantha brought up a good point. What do we lose in that? The idea of those areas of excellence is that not everyone can provide everything to everyone in every place, right? So we're going to have to choose what services are delivered where, and that is a hard conversation. Many of our hospitals are in the red right now, and I'm a little reluctant to talk about healthcare because there's so much expertise in the audience, and I hope we get to hear from some of those folks. But I think that's a really good point, is as we regionalize, what do we lose and how do we kind of staunch that bleed? How do we make it so that folks see the benefits and not just the losses?
I appreciate that, and I'm sorry I didn't come back to you on healthcare, Martine. So I want to open it up to questions or observations from the audience. Two prompts. We tend to, what's the aphorism? We tend to overestimate how much progress can occur in a year and underestimate how much change will occur in a decade. So in the spirit of that, what does leadership look like in this conversation? Understanding that we want to try to, it's a fair objective to try to rationalize the connection between accountability and capacity. So what does leadership look like? What's possible and on what time frame? And what's either good, bad, intention, or provocative in this dialogue that those who are thinking about it ought to be wrestling with? And Austin has the mic.
Thank you. I'm Mike Austin, I'm here at Global Foundries. Thanks for being here this morning. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to keep one pretty general. Are there other states in our region, or maybe nationally, that have tried to navigate this challenge, and what can we learn from them?
Yeah, most of them, really, is the answer, have a much more substantial county government, at least. And Connecticut has something called COGS, Council of Governments. And that's interesting. It's not unlike the RPC structure that we have, which the RPCs, by the way, are a political subdivision of the state. And they are also a municipal corporation, but they are not made up by the participating municipalities. The Council of Governments are, so it's a regional body where a member is appointed from the municipal level directly to the governance body of the COG. And they have had this in place for a few decades. And it allows them to do really interesting things, like, for example, contract vendors and buy things like crack sealant and road salt on the regional scale through the COG. They also do a lot of what our RPCs here in Vermont do in terms of planning and transportation and making decisions about the intermunicipal infrastructure, the roads, the sidewalks, the transit routes. So yeah, the answer is yes. We definitely have neighbors in New England who have approached this in a different way when it comes to what we have as a municipal function of government in Vermont.
Martine.
I was going to say yes, but my answer is a yes, but in terms of education, we have some structures that are arcane, archaic, and frankly bizarre, like non-operating districts where you have a school district with no school. I don't know another state in the country that has that. And when we tell them about it, they just don't understand. And the structure of supervisory unions and supervisory districts, I don't know another state that does that. So we're starting from a place that is kind of unprecedented. I don't think many states understand our structures. And so we have farther to move, I guess, I would say. Also, we did look at Maine and what they did. Maine was a really good example of what not to do. They did a massive redistricting up there, and it was frankly unsuccessful. So, thanks.
Just want to follow up something Samantha said. Elected officials at the town level do have the opportunity to be on the RPC board. Probably half of my members are actual select board sitting members, but it's not a requirement or anything, so that's where that lack of accountability. And the COG model is interesting, because it combines the planning function we already do with service delivery, shared service delivery. The other model that is nearby that is interesting to me is in New York. Put that aside, but just from a governance standpoint, they have several different models of county government. One of them is a board of supervisors where essentially a select board chair, all the select board chairs make up the county board. That feels a little more Vermonty to me, that was connected to the locals and not creating a new layer of elected officials. So that's just a couple of thoughts.
I think I saw Ben Travers out there. Do you want another commission and committee to meet on? I think it's interesting. This is one of the observations I'll make is nearly half of the population in Vermont was not born in Vermont, which means people come with a different set of civic expectations and experiences. But embedded in your question, and I appreciate it, is this idea that it's worth the comparative exercise to really understand how other places have approached some complicated civic structural challenges. Because the expectations of government, expectations of public institutions have only grown in the last 50 years. And we've worked around municipal structures to deliver services. And that has, as a result, over 50 years, created some tension with both democratic accountability and the delivery of services on an equitable basis that I think are pretty interesting and important for us to wrestle with. Next question.
Good morning, Peter Pulmo with Reframe Lab. First of all, as a native of upstate New York, I thank Charlie for pointing out that model. However, I would also caution that New York State is probably the national champion of special districts and public benefit corporations. I think the count beyond the 62 individual counties is something like 5,000 or 6,000 independent state charter districts for various things that are rarely coterminous with county or municipal boundaries. So that's the direction I don't want to go, I would say. However, my more serious question, I guess, possibly for legislators on the panel, but for anyone, you mentioned, Charlie mentioned the state's getting older very rapidly. We're first or second oldest in the country. We're also losing population based on the latest census figures. That always makes me think about the future fiscal capacity of the state and the various increasing demands for public services that come with an aging population and so forth. It seems to me that regionalization of various services has to be a part of the answer to that looming challenge. And what do we do if that cliff comes before we've really pushed hard on this issue. Thank you.
I think we're there. I don't think that flip is coming. I think we are feeling those pressures today. Housing, right? More housing, affordability. We're talking about these things. We're making changes. The problem is we add some things and then it takes time to put them in place. And before they're fully in place, we're like, that didn't get fixed yet. What else do we need to change? And so we don't have that clear north that says, this is the direction that we're going to follow and we're going to stick with this and we're not going to make massive changes to it. And so there are areas, right, for unhoused, for some area, you know, we have to make change, and we had a great plan last year that unfortunately didn't get through into law, that would have regionalized that really in a great way with wraparound services for less money. I'm gonna keep talking about that, right? There are ways we can do this cheaper. We just have to keep looking at it and talking about it and understanding it and stop putting up roadblocks where there aren't any, right? Where we feel like there should be something and we don't want change to happen. As Charlie said earlier, things change. If we choose to do nothing, it's still gonna change. And it's gonna change in a way that we don't like. And so it's hard to get people on board to do the hard things, but we have to keep doing them. It's not a great answer, but I'm in the same place where you are. I'm like, come on, people, let's go.
Other reactions?
I agree with Representative Granning. I think we're there in terms of education. We see what is happening with declining enrollment. We are losing our young students, our young people, and our schools some of them are almost empty. And again, going back to like the complicated structures that we have, I think in Burlington, you know, we're probably going to be looking at, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, we're probably looking at closing a school in the next couple of years. We don't have to go out for a vote for that. We can, as a school board, make that decision, and obviously we would want community buy-in, but it's something that we can do. In other parts of the state, you don't have that option. You, as a school board, you can vote to close a school, but then you actually have to go to the public to vote again for whether or not to close a school. And oftentimes people don't want to lose their little local elementary school. So again, talking about our Byzantine structures, that would be one example.
Not going to take. I have to say, so my parents moved from Burlington to Central Vermont in the early 70s, and the first house they rented was what at one point was a one-room schoolhouse. It was then converted into a home. It was across the street from where Rumney Elementary is, down towards Shady Rill right there. Right up here, at the Adams School is now a bunch of offices with condominiums on the top floor. We invested through the Community Foundation Mission Investment Program in the Park Street School redevelopment project in Springfield, which is now housing a technology accelerator. I think it's worth thinking about Senator Gulick's observation about how hard we've made it to adapt the structures that we inherited to the needs that our children will inherit. And I do think there's an element of Peter's question about demographics and about the loss of population, which should challenge us to try to match the expectations of a new generation to the design of our civic structures and their ability to meet those expectations. So, other questions?
Yeah, a question on this capacity and interest about moving towards a more county structure. Morgan, Hancock, Sandgate, Athens, Brunswick, all communities that are small. How do we ensure that their voices are heard in the conversation? One may assume have a greater interest in moving towards a regionalization or a county structure that's going to provide greater service. Meanwhile, you've got Burlington, Rutland, St. Johnsbury, et cetera, who are larger, may say, we're providing pretty good services, and if there's a discussion, may dominate the discussion. How do we even get the conversation going in a way that's balanced to serve Vermonters?
Your question makes me realize, I think it's really important to say explicitly that regionalization of services currently provided by cities and towns does not require county government. So we have right now a Goldilocks problem with the state law, where to provide a service such as solid waste management or telecommunications infrastructure, we can create a totally new municipality that is separate and distinct from the municipalities that regional service provider works in. So these are like our communication districts, our solid waste districts, our fire districts. Or we can have 2 or more municipalities basically sign an MOU that says we agree to jointly provide this service. And that's like Hancock and Granville sign an MOU that says Granville's firefighters will work out of Hancock's fire department using Hancock's fire trucks, and will jointly provide emergency services to all 911 addresses. The problem is that in that MOU, it's called an intermunicipal cooperative agreement. It comes with no new revenue setting authority. It does not in any way manage the separate and distinct liabilities of the 2 governments. And there are sort of other issues that are unaddressed. And so in something like the 9 or 20-year project towards regional dispatch here in Chittenden County, that's the type of agreement that fell apart when one municipality, one select board decided not to make a sort of critical payment at a critical time, which was within their authority to decide, but then sort of cost the progress towards regional dispatch because the other involved municipalities were sort of also unwilling to take on that additional cost, expense, and liability. So there is a way in the middle where you directly authorize your local governments to work together to share assets, to share liability, and to share revenue in order to do something together. And I think for the small towns like mine, that feels like a much more comfortable way to do it. I live in Hancock, we're in Addison County. We're in 2 Rivers Ottaquechee RPC, which goes over to the New Hampshire border. We have a consolidated non-operating school district with our neighboring town, but we're in the White River Valley Supervisory Union. So we're like, we belong to everyone and no one. We're in a 4th district for VTrans. We're with the Mad River Valley for VTrans. So I think to sort of protect the local decision-making and local capacity, enhancing that intermunicipal authority is probably a better way to go. We provide a lot of services as a community, not as governments, through what we call the Quintown, so the 5 local towns, so Ripton, Granville, Hancock, Rochester, and Pittsfield. And so that's our food bank and our transit service and our, we plan parades together as 5 towns. And so given the option, that would probably be a more achievable scale to do things like plow roads and have, traffic enforcement, right? Than putting us with Middlebury, which is 40 miles away and 10 times the population.
Anybody else want to take a crack?
I just want to add one thing. Every time we're looking at how do these small towns work together or these smaller areas work together, we're relying on an individual or a few individuals to have a lot of capacity to make it work in those areas. We don't have that many people with that much expertise in that many parts of the state to do this work. And so if we can't scaffold it and set up that structure, we will have more deficits and it will be, again, implemented unevenly. And so I'm very, very interested in how do we make that scaffolding happen.
I think that's, I was signaling the last question, and it's, I really want to take the bait on that. I'm going to defer to Austin as host. Who's one more question?
Well, no, I was told I'm doing wrap up here somehow.
Oh, there we go.
I'm not sure what that means really, but my name is Chris Smith. I'm retired. I'm old. What
Thanks
it
for
is.
staying here.
Hey, I know there's been questions about that. I tend to think in really big picture. And my observation over the last 20 years, and this is local, it's regional, it's statewide, it's countrywide, we have lost our ability to think about the greater good and common good. We've come back to, you referenced it earlier, it's about did I win, did I get more than the other side? As leaders of our community, how do you bring us back to the point where we start thinking about the greater common good and less about, did I win in this transaction? I'm dismayed at the way we've gone, and I'd love to figure out how we can get better.
I think that's important. Back to a challenge to end on. I'll invite anybody to comment, and I'm going to jump on it.
I'll say that every time I talk about the fact that we can do better together. We can do better together. And we can make it at least as good as it is for folks today and better for a lot of people. And when you reframe it that way, I think people are ready to make some changes. And if you focus on making sure that is truly the case. So we've been talking, I'll just go back to the school district, right? We closed one of our elementary schools, we repurposed it and created childcare in a childcare desert. That was really important. We still have excess capacity. So now we're taking one of our smallest schools and we're adding services for kids who don't do well in general education. And so we're changing what that does. But again, this goes back to it takes individuals with extra capacity to make these things work because the scaffolding isn't there to make it happen statewide. And so I think that we just have to keep thinking about it and talking about it as how do we make it better for everyone? How do we make sure we're not leaving people behind? And if people aren't interested in doing more and doing better, that's okay. But we need to do it for them anyway.
I'll just add, I think we have a lot more shared values than you would think. You know, watching the media or reading. Well, I don't know if anybody reads anymore, but and so starting at that base level of what is the common good in our community. I think there's probably a lot more agreement there than we think, but it does get tough. Sorry, I can't help thinking about the regional dispatch, and for any of those of you involved in that, I apologize. But it was really challenging, right? And we started. It took 6 or 8 years. And it kind of didn't move for the lack of an initial investment of $2 million of capital, which is a significant chunk, right? Which is really where it bogged down. When we got the select boards of like, can you come up with a quarter of that? Well, that's a big swallow for a select board. And so I hope that we don't get to a place where we just need lots of capital. I'm kind of curious, and I think back to the 60s when we did that governmental transition then. But we were a growing state. I'm sure revenues were growing, and it was a little easier to get into a transition mode. Now we're shrinking, right? And the budgets are getting tighter. It's going to be more of a challenge because there's so much more financial pressure now, and on all of us. In your home and your property taxes. Is there anybody who hasn't complained about property taxes at some point or another? You don't have to raise your hand, I'd be curious, but anyway, it's going to be a challenge, Chris. Thanks for bringing that up, though.
I think your question was like, how did we get here and what can we do to fix it? And I like to look at the big things we've already accomplished through the limited tools that we have now. Like Vermont in 23 and 20, we've had 2 separate billion-dollar floods. And that initial life-saving response during the nights of the flood was done by town and state government. The recovery to put roads and culverts back together was done by town and state government. And the long-range planning to make our communities more resilient to the next 100-year flood, which could come soon. You know, the breakup has happened here in the Winooski and the White River. Is again executed by state and local government. And when we were advocating last year for CHIP, which is a new financing authority for municipal government to make investments, to grow, to build homes for new future employees of your businesses and in your workplaces, this question came up a lot. Like, well, can small towns really use it? It's so hard, tax increment financing. And I'm like, well, they comply with FEMA and they do it without the internet or electricity. So yeah, if we provide that scaffolding, then these volunteers, these professional staff, some of them in the room are elected and appointed officials, they can get really big, complicated things done when it's really important, and when we have that shared sense of value and priority to do it.
I'm just going to wrap us up, and I just want to thank the panelists for sharing their perspective, and thank everybody here for the questions. Just a couple of parting observations. Over the course of 5 years after 2021, we were part of a project called the Working Communities Challenge. Anybody familiar with that? A couple of folks raised their hands. It was a program of the Boston Fed that did community development projects in cities and towns across the state. And a couple of the teams working on those projects were regional teams. And to the question about Lane Grove and Andover and some of those smaller places, what revealed itself in that project was that when you do things on a regional basis, small towns actually have greater agency and participation than they do if they're isolated and left to do things with the capacity that they have within their borders. So that the platform for equity is actually doing things on a great regional basis if you're talking about the delivery of services that improve the lives of Vermonters and on which people rely. And Samantha said something really important about the Hancock experience on the Quintown basis. The social fabric of place can exist separate from governance. We see it in the Community Foundation all the time. The ties that bind people to each other as neighbors, the food pantry, the after-school programs, the things that people do together that cultivate shared experience and build communities are only partially municipally determined. So, in the spirit of where leadership comes from, civic reform, civic transformation, never comes from within government entirely. So there is a really important role for non-governmental associations and organizations to call out higher expectations for the municipal structures on which people rely, and regional structures and state structures. And it's really important for you as members of the Lake Chamber or other associations in which you participate to call that question, because transformation, people in systems have a hard time working on systems. You can look at healthcare, education, state government, municipal government, higher education, you name it. People in systems have a hard time working on systems. So it's when we come together outside and set higher expectations that the opportunity for transformation over time, right? Nothing's going to happen in a year. But over time, progress becomes possible again. So thank you for taking time this morning, and thank you again for the panelists.
Thank you, panelists. And thank you to our hosts, Dealer.com, and our sponsors, East Rise Credit Union. folks will be back with another legislative breakfast April 20th. It'll be more of the networking that you're used to, but thank you for participating and listening to this panel today. This is the beginning of the conversation for the Lake Champlain Chamber, one that's kind of happened behind more closed doors recently, but we want to engage with everybody on what a future regional government would look like. So drop me an email if you're interested in participating in that. It's austin@vermont.org. And we look forward to working with you over the summer and fall to, in conjunction with the state task force and all of the partners here, to imagine what regional governments could look like and what more efficiency can look like in our region. Thank you.
My name's Jeff Lawson, Lawson. I'm the Vice President of Tourism for the Lake Champlain Chamber. And in that capacity, I have the privilege of working on the Hello Burlington Destination Marketing Initiative. We've been looking at some form of regional government and governance for our industry specifically, because that's how all of our competitors and other destinations around the entire United States are funded and how they're organized. They really don't do it town by town, every place for itself. They work together as a region or as a county. So specifically for us, this is of tremendous interest. They're able to not only bond infrastructure development like convention centers, for example, or arenas, but also able to tax at a county-wide level in order to maintain, manage, and promote that infrastructure on an ongoing basis. Something we simply can't do in our neck of the woods based on the size of our population and the lack of regional government.
My reactions to the event. I think that it showed that we've got, there's local control that I think we want, and there's local control that maybe we don't want. And I think we're at the beginning of figuring out what are those things and how, and if we can figure that out, how we can achieve more benefits for Vermonters, which I would define as, first of all, controlling costs, property taxes, increasing prosperity in more places, and having more resources so that we can future-proof ourselves against flooding and for all the changes that are coming in this very uncertain time that we're living through.
So what's your name, your position in your district, and why did you come here today?
I'm Kate Lally. I represent Shelburne, half of Shelburne. And I came here because I'm extremely interested in regionalization. I think that we've sort of run out, we're bottoming out of what we can do with our current systems and structures. And I'm interested as a legislator in helping us find new and better ways to serve Vermonters and meet their needs. Again, for me, it's looking forward to a future Vermont. So meeting needs in the present, but also setting us up, most importantly, for being able to do a better job of meeting everybody's needs in the future. And I think that how we use land resources is going to be the key to that. And I think it also reflects, it's the way we're going to also reflect Vermonters' values going forward. Our values of conservation, our values of habitat preservation, for flood resiliency, but also to reinvest our historic settlement pattern across this wonderful little state that we have, with more opportunities for everybody, and housing, education, small businesses, community life, all the things that Vermonters love and value.
Hi, my name's Peter Plumeau. I live in South Burlington, and I run a small consulting firm here in Chittenden County. I came to this event today because, one, I've been part of the Chamber's Regional Affairs Committee for a number of years, and I am on that committee because I believe Chittenden County and indeed the rest of Vermont really needs to think big about cross-municipal solutions to the challenges we're facing. Fiscal challenges, social service challenges, housing challenges. Individual towns cannot deal with all these things, these bigger issues, these complex issues on their own. And I think it's past time that we put aside our parochial interests on a town-by-town basis and think much more big picture, think regionally about the benefits that could accrue to the region from working together, from sharing resources, from sharing people, sharing ideas, for the benefit of the entire region, again, across towns, not just at town level.
It says it's on time. Today is the new day, so yeah. It's coming today. Friday is coming today.
I'll see you later. Yeah, I'm going to be on Zoom. Yeah. I think I'm just going to go to the AFP in the office because it's going to my office.
It's fine, not me, for somebody else. I ran into Ramsey. It was proud of him, right? Moderate everyone.
I do. I just got to get that thing, so I should take it to the committee. Yeah, no, I hear you. It's going to be Zoom. It's all good.
See it.
Martin, did I say you?
Band back. I was just going to get the dessert.
Sure. It's the only way you're going to bend the curve.
I live in one of the most interesting ones. That's exactly it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that whole thing.
You know, I've never really here.
Morning. Morning. That's the issue with Vermont, kind of real art.
Maria, I put my stuff right down here.
Even if it doesn't actually change, you can tie up the entire town. Yeah, and it's the same time, but also I get, you know, you can have it one way or the other. Hey, Leslie, how you doing? Pretty good.
So you're busy, busy. I'm so glad. I said from the beginning after we had the first conversation. She's just too conversationalist, communicating,
it's not like that.
people person, and all had to be just in the she's probably seen like
It gets fast and
Good job, Moderator.
You need to lead this, you need to, like, you're kind of waiting for them to respond.
You know, I can tell you, I don't think so. Hi, everyone. How are you?
Evan's was Ellis. I know Evan independent in his own right, because we sit on the but his wife Kate just came to work with me last September, and I was just telling him again for like the whole time how much I so now we have that in common, which is nice. Yes, that was the funny. So we met Kate. I'd be like, oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, this is his wife. I was like, okay. No, it's like, there you go. That's a disconnect. Yes. His wife, yes. Yeah. They've done kids. 12 and 13 and 10. It's because they tend to talk. And the other started conversations with her, and then it took like a month or two, and all of a sudden I'm like, I didn't know my mom, like I never put it together, like I knew him in one context.
Together.
Either 6 months.
I know.
Oh, say hi.
And I'll
That's right. I'm gonna go grab my coffee.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna get my coffee.
I'm gonna sit up top somewhere, out of the way.
This guy.
They're nice when you take these out too.
Yeah, just because I know.
You're gonna get new so then, like, I hit it listserv open, I hit it all the way till about 12:30, and then everything was skied out. And I think we got there 12:30, this stinks. But like in the morning, like there was about this much snow on top of the crust. So like if you were the first one in there, you got great turns. All right, how many I'm headed to New York right after this. Actually, right now. Yeah, I got the leadership meeting. Like, how many games should we get about the place? It's a huge front coming across, so it's not Burlington that's the problem. It's like, can you get in New Jersey per tail? Because I'm going to New York. It's the only way to get there.
I know, right?
I know. The train's messed up now. Anyway, I'll be there till Thursday. Really good. I know. That costs money. Rushing it.
Hey, Sabina. How are you?
The cycle to get somebody on to actually work with us about months. We've got to have walk in there. So when you lost somebody, it took 10 months to take your pipeline to get it back in. And then we did really well with the Medicare piece coverage this year. So we got a 9.5% increase in rates. So that's like, I didn't budget for that. So I doubled what you got with the estimate for January. So anyway, we're in good shape. I'm happy with the company. I think we're doing good stuff. We fixed a lot of compliance stuff that really disconcerting when I got there. Like, it was a small company and they were doing stuff like, hey, this isn't, you can't do it this way. And so they brought in the compliance officer. I brought in the VP rev cycle. Fixed a lot of documentation issues we had. Got upgraded like a lot of our data stack. Went to QuickBooks to use interactions for our accounting program. Well, we're a teenager. Like, you know, we still make our mistakes. Integrated to Ramsey.
I don't know what these are. Yeah, everybody sit next to the camera. Man, are we in the way here?
Yeah, I know how
I happened to be a guest at VR last Friday. Not from you, somebody else. I ran into my bonkers already. I was like, how is he not good? In fact, I had seen him at dinner earlier, and I was like, he was describing the schedule to me, trying to recruit me. Oh, and he runs a farm, too. So I have to stay really tracked with them. And then like Oregon's changing some of the stuff around corporate tax assessments, so I have to stay tracking them back. What's up? There. We have a pretty good business there, but if it gets more like California, I start to say it's not really worth it either. But it's no brainer. I've got a third of my business. But I've got to help out of here. So I'd be giving away $20 million. It's not nothing, but I have to incorporate Big day. That's a little different. Just started acquiring asset acquisition. It's a correct, but it's a good companion piece because the skilled nursing facilities need somebody to do that level of pharmaceutical things. It makes you sticky to them. So you don't make money on it. Like it's kind of a neutral business, but it creates that. Exactly. So I'm learning like all these different little nuances of how that business runs and how it operates, how to be valuable. Someday we should drink and talk about it. So you're technically primarily up, but it's really $1 billion. His name's Andy Paul, First Capital. He runs it out of either Colorado skiing, San Lucas, or he's got a place in New York. And he's a character, like a big, this is officially kicking off. It's a big massive personality.
All right. So how is Kate doing?
Good morning. Welcome. My son works for you. Why they're not a part of it?
Well, they got the deposit, but they're not part of the bottle bill, right? They're not part of. Why are they not part of commingling sorting?
Why are they not mandated as a member of the PRO?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know that they said this is under the law. That's not our like there should be carriers.
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that I sent Dick Sherman about 18 bullet points, all with the purpose of we generally feel like down the road this could work.
Sorry. No, I love it.
Oh, sorry.
I'm in the cheap seats. Hey, how are you?
We generally feel the PRO will work long term, but there are a lot of things that I really think that there's got to be either a task force or a group over the season.
I'm sorry.
You know, I kind of.
We called it at 7 days, and I don't know how the younger thing down the road.
Michael's right over there.
Yes, I think so. We'll go to the other side.
Also interviewing on the East Coast, but I think she's figuring it out, and they called her back and work out the skill out of her second year where the teacher's lab, so she's having to delay her
Good morning, folks. Good morning. Folks could start finding their seat for their last coffee. We're going to get started in a bit.